Hello and welcome to And the Runner-Up Is. This week on the show, we'll travel back in time to the 23rd Academy Awards, which awarded the films of 1950. Billy Wilder arrived with a dark and cynical look at the Hollywood system with Sunset Boulevard, starring William Holden and Gloria Swanson in her epic return to the big screen. The film went on to earn 11 Oscar nominations, including one in all four acting categories, and walked away with 3 awards. But it was the other show business drama that year, All About Eve, that dominated with 14 nominations and 6 wins, including one for Best Picture. So why did Sunset Boulevard come up short? We'll explore all this and more as we discuss how the Oscar almost went to Sunset Boulevard. Hello and welcome back to And the Runner-Up Is. I am your host, Kevin Jacobson, and today we have reached the beginning of the 1950s as I go backwards in time in Oscar history. We're now going back 70 years ago now for 1950, one of the most incredible sort of Oscar years that Oscarologists like to remember. The year of All About Eve and Sunset Boulevard and Judy Holliday of Born Yesterday. Lots of fabulous stuff to talk about this year. And I decided to invite a very, very, very special guest, someone who is no stranger to sort of Oscar fans who are a fan of this particular person's YouTube channel, the owner of Be Kind Rewind, which is an essential for Oscar fans, all about the best actress races of the past. Totally obsessed with these videos whenever she puts one out. And I am honored to have the voice behind Be Kind Rewind. It's Izzy. Izzy, welcome.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Are you excited to talk about this incredible Oscar year?
I am very, very excited. This is packed full with heavy hitters, so
It truly
it's an
is.
exciting year for sure.
Yes, and I'm very intrigued to hear your thoughts on this Best Actress race in particular, because it's certainly one of the most notorious ones.
Definitely, yeah. I've been getting many requests for me to
Oh,
do a video about this year.
I'm sure you have. But today we are talking about Sunset Boulevard. Wow. So excited for this one. One of my absolute favorite movies of all time. So let's get into it. Just a quick summary of the film. It is a film noir drama about a Hollywood screenwriter named Joe Gillis, who kind of has hit a dry spot in his career and is hiding from men who are trying to repossess his car. Eventually, he turns into the driveway of a big mansion to sort of hide out, only to find that the inhabitant is Norma Desmond, a silent film star past her prime, who is quite bitter about how Hollywood has cast her out. And she ultimately sees Joe as her opportunity to stage her big comeback. And she's written a star vehicle for herself, and she's hoping that Joe will put on the finishing touches on it and help get it made. Meanwhile, we have Joe moonlighting with a script reader named Betty Schaefer, who is writing a script of her own, and Joe starts to fall in love with her, and Norma sort of sinks deeper and deeper into desperation and delusions of grandeur, and all of this is leading to tragic consequences. So, the film was directed by Billy Wilder, who co-wrote the script with Charles Brackett and D.M. Marshman Jr. It stars William Holden as Joe, Gloria Swanson as Norma Desmond, Nancy Olson as Betty, and Eric von Stroheim as not Gloria's butler, Norma's butler, Max. And Sunset Boulevard was a giant hit with critics and nominated for 11 Academy Awards, winning 3, but not Best Picture. So, Izzy, let's get into Sunset Boulevard.
Great.
What is your relationship with this film and your general thoughts overall?
So I hadn't actually rewatched this film for a really long time. I think I had first seen it in high school, and maybe I've seen it once or twice since then, but rewatching it, I was really struck by how magical and kind of otherworldly it feels. I don't think that I'd remembered that from having seen it before. Um, it has such a wonderful way of kind of blending different genres. I think it definitely evokes kind of this post war cynicism, but also film noir and also melodrama. And it was just sort of beautiful to kind of revisit that and see how these different elements kind of blend together. And another thing that I was really surprised and really enjoyed watching this time around was sort of the in jokes about Hollywood that I might have missed when I had seen it the first time. Jokes about the waxworks and these silent figures that kind of make cameo appearances. I read a review that said something like Sunset Boulevard is Hollywood telling on itself. And
Yeah.
I think that's a really excellent way of phrasing that, just
Hmm.
sort of Hollywood looking at itself in the mirror and pointing out its flaws the way that normal people do.
Yeah.
Um, and so it was really a delight to kind of see how Billy Wilder and Charles Brackett kind of dug deep and maybe put Hollywood on blast in a way that might have felt a little uncomfortable for people at the time.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So it's time for me to trot out that word again that I use once in a while, and that is masterpiece. So Sunset Boulevard, I would definitely call a masterpiece for many reasons. The character of Norma Desmond alone is truly one of the great movie characters of all time. This reclusive star who is constantly reliving her past, watching her old movies, just stuck in a time warp and frustrated with how Hollywood just has no use for her anymore. And she's one of the great sort of tragic figures. And I don't know, I guess in other hands, I don't know, I think it would be tempting to really turn her into just a monster, right?
Yeah.
That's just beyond our sympathies, just sort of this two-dimensional villain. And she does some questionable things, fair to say, but
Mm-hmm.
it's such a fine line that the film walks, where she can feel like the villain of the story at times, but you also really come to understand her and pity her. Almost just the level of desperation she has to be back in the spotlight
Mm-hmm.
and loved and appreciated and not forgotten. I think that's the most important thing for her, is to not be forgotten. And she's just so lonely, and she sees Joe not only as this sort of career advancing opportunity, but also just as a companion when
Right.
everyone else except I guess her butler has basically left her behind. And Gloria Swanson is truly, truly unreal in this film.
Yeah, I think unreal is a really great way to put it,
Mm,
because I think the production design in this movie is so wonderful. How he sort of builds these two different worlds that are so separate from each other. This, decaying mansion
mm,
on Sunset Boulevard versus these parties that the main character will go to that has all these young people kind of listening to music and dancing with each other. The contrast is so potent, and it just kind of reemphasizes her character so well.
and her eyes. I mean, can we talk about it?
Yes.
They
They're
just
kind of crazy, but like I think one other thing that I really noticed this time around, obviously Norma Desmond is such a quotable character. Her
mm,
lines are iconic at this point, but one of the things I loved was the moments that Gloria Swanson finds in silence were
yes.
really powerful to me. There's a moment where, she's going to go check on William Holden, and she knows he's distraught, but she kind of confronts a mirror before she goes into seeing him in the other room. And she pauses to kind of check herself out and make sure she looks okay.
Hmm.
And it's just this moment where you sort of realize how small her world is and how obsessed with herself she is. And the way that Gloria Swanson did that is just beautiful.
Yes. It's a very well modulated performance. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very apparent that she herself was a silent film star, because almost every expression and gesture is grand and sort of expressive, and I guess you could also say performative. That's a lot of what Norma is doing in a way, is because of her stardom that she had and the pain that she feels of being left behind. She really has become sort of stuck in this larger than life persona, almost, you could say.
Mhm.
So it's a lot to take in at first, and I could see someone saying that, oh, she's just being too over the top at the beginning before we really get to know her. But everything is intentional and so smartly conceived
Mhm.
on her part. But
Yeah. I'd be curious to see how people who don't watch a lot of old movies would react to it.
yeah.
Whether like how that would kind of hit with them.
Hmm.
I'm just not sure because I could totally see that argument that it feels a little too big in
Yeah.
the beginning, but of
It's
course that's the point. So
Yeah. I mean, just, like scrolling through Letterboxd, I've seen a few comments about that is just like, wow, she's too much.
yeah.
But as much as Norma Desmond really dominates, I should say, a lot of the attention when it comes to the film, it is really Joe's story.
Mhm.
And I think William Holden is very well cast for this role. Um, he's a bit of movie star handsome, more so than the average screenwriter maybe, but I think he gets like the cynicism down pat, and I think he's very, very well suited for those kinds of witty little turns of phrase, in the narration.
Yeah, absolutely. He supports her very well. I mean, I think
Yeah.
like you said, it is her story, but he's restrained enough that it balances her really well.
Hmm. Just one that I wrote down just because I love the way he delivered it as well is he's just like, you don't yell at a sleepwalker. He may fall and break his neck. I
Amazing.
just love the sort of droll way he phrases things. But
Yeah, there's so many lines like that where he just delivers this absolutely perfect witticism
mhm.
in such a dry way. I love it.
Yeah. And his character is pretty fascinating too because he's become very jaded by this system. And he's pretty much ready to give up on his dreams and move back to Ohio and become a newspaper writer again. But there's also this little glimmer of hope that, you know, he's presented with both Norma and with Betty. And he gets so much of that sort of idealistic young writer passion thing again when he's working with Betty. But then when the reality sets in of his current situation with Norma, it's like he's sort of realized he doesn't really have the stuff to continue in this business, and he's not even really willing to change, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think Hollywood has made him jaded, but I also think he's not entirely absolved from responsibility either. you know, Eventually we just see him giving up and not going with Betty and not wanting to stay in Hollywood because it's just too hard.
Yeah, the way that he snaps is really well executed
Yes.
because it's built up so long, and you can see how far into his own despair he's kind of gotten into.
Mm-hmm.
And so you really do believe it when he is just done and doesn't want to try anymore.
Yeah. What do you think of William Holden just as an actor himself, and especially in this role?
I really enjoy William Holden. I mean, none of his movies are, I guess, except for this one, are movies that I return to again and again,
Yeah.
and maybe more than yesterday, ironically. But I always find him really compelling because he does just sort of seem like this, not stoic, but always consistent, a little bit reserved character that you feel like you can kind of trust, even if he is kind of on the down and out like he is in this movie.
Yeah. I would say he's sturdy.
Sturdy is a good
Just very
word.
dependable, I suppose.
Yeah.
And you could see why, studios would just keep wanting to cast him because he does have that presence about him. And he has sort of that masculine energy to him as well.
Mm-hmm.
That, he has the good looks and he also has that man's man sort of quality to him.
Yeah, I can absolutely see why ladies of the day would have wanted to have his picture on their wall.
Yeah. I mean, we already talked about Picnic, where he spends like half the time with his shirt off. So,
Right, exactly.
this
Yeah.
was the prime time for William Holden. And I truly cannot find like an Oscar year now that I'm covering the 50s where William Holden is not some sort of presence in one of these
Well,
of.
I think that's also drawing the contrast between William Holden as like kind of this mature sex icon.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that this movie puts his body on display rather than Gloria Swanson's, because it is sort of this switcheroo of the gender dynamic that you typically
Yeah.
see,
Mm-hmm.
which again goes to reemphasize concerns with aging and how women are portrayed when they're over a certain age, that he becomes the eye candy and not her.
Mm-hmm. It's also interesting the perspective that we have of when Norma Desmond is sort of doing her giant beauty routines in the middle
Mm-hmm.
there when she's getting ready to make her big comeback. It's almost presented as desperate in some ways. Just like, she
Yeah.
shouldn't be doing all of this. It's ridiculous when you think about it, like, this is more or less a normal thing that a lot of actors and actresses would go through even nowadays.
Oh,
Just
yeah. I
getting
mean,
ready for a role. Like,
what
it's,
she did is a fraction of what
yeah,
most of us do nightly.
truly.
So,
Yeah. But the levels of this film are just insane in terms of like the meta levels, like you were talking about. Gloria Swanson herself being a silent film star back in the day, her watching a film in the movie called Queen Kelly that she started in real life.
mm-hmm.
She also, I read, had a property on Sunset Boulevard. She received fan letters like that. And then obviously her butler, played by Eric von Stroheim, was actually the director of Queen Kelly himself.
Mm-hmm.
And there are all these cameos. Cecily DeMille, Hedda Hopper, Buster Keaton.
Yeah, and just the fact that they drive onto the Paramount lot in a
Yeah.
Paramount movie is it's this weird meta
Yeah.
moment.
And it's also, I mean, it doesn't exactly paint the best picture of Paramount itself, just like the system.
Yeah, and just doing a little bit of reading about this movie before we recorded, I read that Louis B. Mayer during a screening was really upset about it
Yep.
because he was like, I can't believe you're presenting us like this. This is horrible. I don't remember exactly what he said, but that's
Well,
essentially the sentiment.
it's funny you mention it because I did write this down.
There you go.
This is what he said. He said, "You have disgraced the industry that made and fed you. You should be tarred and feathered and run out of Hollywood."
Well, yep.
So there you have it.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah. So, I mean, I sort of get the sentiment behind it just because it is presenting Hollywood in a pretty negative light, largely, in a
Mm-hmm.
way that, hasn't really been presented before, but still it's very extreme. And I've also read that it got a little interesting with sort of commenting on Jewishness that is very dark and upsetting that I read
Right.
about. But yeah.
Right. I mean, it's interesting because I don't think that this kind of story would have been unfamiliar to people. I mean, like, for example, one version of A Star is Born had already come out.
Yeah.
What Price Hollywood, obviously, which is like the precursor to A Star is Born. But I think maybe because of its tone
Yeah.
and when it was coming out, it must have just felt more severe
Yeah.
a criticism.
And I think studios were starting to feel threatened by the presence of television as well.
Mm-hmm.
That
Absolutely.
a lot of people were staying home rather than going out to the theater. So, but, looking at all that, all of the cameos and the just meta-ness of it all, I can imagine seeing this movie in 1950 and just feel like my mind was blown because, like, it almost operates as this really realistic look into the actual players in Hollywood at the time. And I feel like
Hmm.
it would just resonate so strongly if I was steeped in that film culture at the time.
Yeah, and I think you could interpret that a couple of different ways
Mm-hmm.
because I'm sure there are audience members who watched that film and thought, "Oh my gosh, finally someone is telling it like it is," or revealing these aspects. It might have also made other audience members feel uncomfortable that, oh no, people are going to find out this illusion isn't real.
Yeah.
And then alternatively, and I think this is kind of borne out by the box office numbers, that it just didn't hit as well in not New York and LA as it did there,
Yeah.
because obviously like the audiences were more interested in that industry.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's interesting that like by so obviously addressing film and entertainment in Hollywood, it kind of can isolate, but also feel like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, but I like how the film really does highlight sort of the everyday person behind the scenes too. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like the director or the screenwriter or even the lighting person, in that one scene, how it's all this great collaborative process and all the people involved are so passionate about it in some way or the other. Like, yeah, like the moment where Norma is at the Paramount Studios and she's sitting in the director chair and that gaffer who goes by the name Hawkeye
Yeah.
notices her, and he's just so thrilled to just be there and doing what he loves, and how he shines the spotlight right on Norma. Everyone sort of has their role, and even though this is a very cynical film that's looking at Hollywood in a darker way than many were used to seeing up to that point, it's also sort of in a way an ode to this studio system at the time, which I think is kind of an interesting undercurrent.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
For sure.
And speaking to some of the supporting players, I think Eric von Stroheim is pretty excellent here as Norma's butler, Max.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I love him in this.
Yeah.
It's so good.
And he turns out to have a deeper relationship with Norma than it appears at first. And that twist there is very, very dark and fascinating. He's such a foreboding presence.
Right, he's sort of like the way his eyes are kind of like dark,
Yeah.
just kind of makes him a very imposing
Mm-hmm.
figure. But I think I could see an argument that his character is sort of like the most crazy. I mean,
Okay,
not
go
to
on.
use like I don't know if I like using that word, but like uh it's interesting because he's fully aware of what he's doing
Mm-hmm.
and the illusions that he's creating, and he's watched this woman that he's just absolutely obsessed with move on with her life, and he's still following her around and doing her every bidding, and yet he's perfectly happy with it,
Mm-hmm.
which is it's a fascinating character, but it's also it speaks to his own kind of uh, problems, I guess,
Yeah.
with finding himself in his own life.
Yeah. And writing the fan letters himself. It's
Hmm.
just, yeah, so dark. Yeah,
Yeah,
very unsettling. Gets under my skin.
yeah,
And you can also you can tell that I think that he and Gloria Swanson had previously had a working relationship before this. I think they have a pretty natural chemistry, I suppose.
hmm,
That it's very well suited. And then Nancy Olson is, it's not the most earth-shattering performance we've ever seen nominated for Best Supporting Actress, but I do like that the film allows for her backstory to be heard as well, and she's not just this empty symbol that is sort of just defined by Joe. She has her own ambitions,
yeah,
and she's this third generation growing up in Hollywood and in the business, so she represents a new kind of Hollywood, a new kind of storyteller, someone who cares very deeply about creating just a very thought-provoking story. And that's very much crystallized just in the beginning scene where Betty and Joe are fighting a bit, and he dismisses her as another one of those young screenwriters who only wants message films, which,
Yeah.
is another thing that we hear echoed even in today's film discourse or whatever
Right.
online, where, the older generation sometimes likes to complain about films that do have some sort of strong political message that might deviate from their own views, and then it's this whole thing of whatever happened to good old-fashioned storytelling entertainment. So
Right. Yeah. I think she's just kind of the perfect foil for both
mm-hmm.
Joe and Norma,
Mm-hmm.
because she's more ambitious than Joe, I think. She's a hard worker. She's youthful. And she also makes positive decisions for her
Yeah,
life.
yeah.
She has standards and she's willing to say no to meet those standards.
Right.
And that's just not something that Joe or really Norma are willing to do.
And she doesn't want to be stuck in the past the way things have always been done,
Mm-hmm.
like everyone else in the film. Yeah. And I mean, I think Nancy Olson is solid enough in the role, but not really someone you walk away from the movie remembering as much. I know it's just not really a nomination that's remembered exactly fondly, but I think she's solid enough. I don't know about you.
Yeah. Oh no. I mean, I think yeah, it's hard to get recognition when you're kind of the one person who feels like a real person
Yeah.
in the movie. I mean, everybody is so magnetic because they're kind of haunting and mysterious, and then
Mm-hmm.
she's just very open and positive about who she is. And I think you can just be so easily attracted to the other side of things.
Yeah. But she holds her own, I would say.
Oh yeah, for
Um,
sure.
well, the cinematography, going to some of the technical elements, just the use of shadows and darkness, especially in Norma's mansion, is so haunting and gothic and evocative.
Mm-hmm.
And it just perfectly captures the character of Norma and her being this shut in. And then for Joe, it's almost like this house of horrors, basically, with all these shadows and pictures of her everywhere. So, I mean, just every shot in Norma's mansion is just its own work of art for me when I watch it.
Yeah. The one shot that I love, I think, the most in the movie is where she is watching her own
Mm,
film and she stands up and she
yes.
sort of realizes the light is on her and she kind of turns around and it just makes this glowing rim around her profile. It's just so
Gorgeous.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it also, and I mean, it works for like helping understand her character as well. So it's just all around such a perfect moment.
Yeah. Ugh, I love that scene so much.
Yeah.
Mm. Well, with the ending of the film, we see from the start that, something tragic is going to happen. So we know where this is heading, but it's still so suspenseful, and it almost moves like a horror film where
Yeah.
Joe is inviting Betty to the mansion to see the situation that he's been living in, and thankfully she leaves before any craziness goes down, because that could
Yeah.
have gone in other directions.
Yeah. I mean, there's a version of this where she could be dead at the
Yeah,
end for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
I loved that when she kind of comes over and he says, "There's the pool,"
Mm,
and it's sort of lit up at night. That was just such a perfect moment for me because I think so much of the film has passed since the beginning, and you kind of have buried that element of the plot kind of in your head somewhere.
hmm.
And the moment he points it out, you're like, "Oh no!" It's just
Yeah.
this reminder where you kind of notice how much he's broken down, and you suddenly remember something really bad is about to happen to him.
Oh, yeah. With Betty and Norma having that confrontation where he's telling her the truth, or Joe is telling her the truth, that Cecil B. DeMille isn't necessarily interested in her script.
Mm-hmm.
He isn't interested in her comeback. No one really is. And the fan letters aren't really what they appear to be. It's a very disturbing scene almost to watch, especially if you have a sympathy for Norma. And it's very traumatic for her to have to confront all of these realities at once. And she snaps. She
Yeah.
snaps. And the very last scene, of course, where the policemen and the camera crews have arrived at her mansion, and she seems to have just completely disassociated,
Hmm.
is chilling. And yeah, I mean, obviously the extended shot of her walking down her staircase and everyone else seems sort of frozen
Right. I
watching
think
her.
that's the most beautiful part of it. Like, what
Mm-hmm.
a brilliant moment of direction to just keep everybody completely still. And she
Yeah.
kind of slithers down.
Yes.
It's amazing.
And then the moment of her saying in the end, though, that this is her life and there's nothing else, nothing else matters. It's just them and the cameras. And when she looks straight into the camera and says, "Those wonderful people out there in the dark," her eyes widening in that moment. Oh my God. What a moment.
It's like that meme. I don't remember what the GIF is, but someone's like, "Me?
Exactly. Just like, me?
I'm in the dark."
Yes. Yeah, that moment always gives me chills, and the way she delivers that is haunting. And of course, her famous line, "Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close up," and her slinking towards the camera. I mean,
Mhm.
what an incredible, daring ending, that just.
Especially because he was a working director at the time. That's
Right.
like, that's so funny to me. Like, if someone ended a movie like, "I'm ready for my close up, Mr. Jenkins," I'd be like, "Oh, cool."
Yes. Yeah. Um, and it really all exposes everything that's wrong with how Hollywood treats older actresses, and also just what fame can do to you if you just let it take over you.
Hmm.
And it's also just this undercurrent of how difficult it was in many ways to treat people who have psychological issues and are mentally ill, especially at this time. Like, people just don't really know what to do with you,
Right.
which I
It,
find fascinating as well.
right. Have you ever watched The Twilight Zone?
Oh, yes.
Do you remember that episode with Ida Lupino where it's like basically
Yeah.
Sunset Boulevard.
Yes, yes, yes,
It
yes.
reminded me so much of that,
I'm
where you
sure it
just are
was,
so
yeah.
stuck in the past, um, and just have a complete, what's the right word? Inability to grasp how old you are
Mm-hmm.
and where you fit in the modern context.
Yeah. There's also an episode of Law and Order SVU of Carol Burnett plays a character similar to
Oh,
this.
yes, I've seen this one.
Yes.
Yes.
And it's also kind of fascinating on a meta level too, because she would play a Nora Desmond on her Carol Burnett show.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
fascinating. Um, so, do you want to talk any more about sort of just the themes of how the film in 1950 is tackling this idea of what the industry does to actresses when they reach a certain age, which, by the way, she's only 50. you
Right.
know
Yeah. It's
she
so
is not
shocking now.
she's not like 75 and it's she's 50 and
And
she
she looks so
still
good.
looks great. Her skincare, I mean, I want to know what her skincare line is. I just it's yeah. But
Yeah.
do you have any
I
other additional thoughts on that?
I think, I mean, this is a problem that women have faced since probably the beginning of the moving image.
Yeah.
I think Best Actress, correct me if I'm wrong, is the youngest on average award. Like, the
Yeah.
people who win it on average are the youngest.
Yeah. Well, I have a good
Um,
stat for that that I
oh,
just
good, good.
read because Gold Derby just posted an article about how if Renee Zellweger wins for Judy this year, she will be the 10th oldest Best Actress winner.
Right. And
And
she's
she is,
51.
yeah. So,
Right. It's crazy.
yeah.
So I mean, obviously, so this has been pretty, it's normal for women, I think, to question what opportunities would be available for them as actresses as they pass 35, I would say.
Yeah.
Um, and not many, I mean, no women from the silent era, except for at that point, maybe Joan Crawford, were still working regularly. So I think there's just an element of acknowledging a problem without really doing much to solve it. And in a way, I think both of these films, or All About Eve and Sunset Boulevard, acknowledge this problem. I think All About Eve treats Margot more kindly with this issue.
Oh, yeah.
But, this is something that people would have been familiar with in real life. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure like Mary Pickford and Clara Bow had kind of isolated themselves. Greta Garbo obviously was a pretty notorious recluse. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, I think it would have just echoed really well for what people knew to be true, but maybe didn't want to acknowledge.
Yeah. And speaking to some of those other silent actresses, it's interesting reading about how a lot of them passed on doing this particular role. Mm-hmm. Because some of them just didn't want to put that out in the world. It's too dark. And I know one actress, I don't remember who it was, but said something about how, like, none of us were as loony as this one. So.
Yeah. And I think it's funny, too, that Gloria Swanson accepted this role because I had read that she had done, like, one season of TV prior to accepting it. And literally was feeling like, oh, my God, the small screen is a nightmare. Like, the pictures are too small.
Right.
And so, kind of being able to work out that feeling and that anxiety about having lost any of your professional opportunities within a character is it's a really cool concept. It must have felt fulfilling, I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, another thing I wanted to talk about just really quickly is the musical adaptation.
Oh, yeah.
In the 90s, Andrew Lloyd Webber, from the twisted mind of Andrew Lloyd Webber, comes this musical adaptation, and specifically Glenn Close. As we all know, I'm a fan.
Or Patti LuPone, depending on where you fall.
This is true. It's a violent sort of rivalry there, but I'm interested to see, first of all, if a movie musical adaptation gets made. I know it was announced, but I do wonder how much it will resonate in today's culture, specifically, 70 years later. Again, it's been a long time, and I just am very curious to see if something happens there. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on the musical itself? I know it's sort of regarded as pretty mediocre in many ways.
Right. So I have to confess, I haven't actually seen it. I know the music really well because I've just listened to the soundtrack, and I am obsessed with every performance Glenn Close does of it on YouTube. I've watched them a million times.
Same.
But it's my understanding that they sort of reframe it or to more emphasize Norma than the movie does, which I think is really fascinating. And I would love to see this story. I guess reframed is the right word, just to kind of get more into her psyche from her own perspective. So if the time comes where they do a movie musical, I would hope that would be a priority for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also getting Glenn Close her Oscar. Duh.
Truly. That is the main primary motivator for me.
Yes.
But yes, you put it in one of your videos, this reference to go watch the Sunset Boulevard performances she's done.
And they're so good. She's just fantastic. I don't think she gets enough credit for that.
Yeah. And she just nails that sense of desperation. And some people say, like, is she the best singer? Not necessarily, but she gets the character so right.
I mean, Glenn Close playing a woman who doesn't get enough credit for the great work she's done. I can't imagine how that must be a stretch for her.
Yes. Oh boy. Yeah. Some might say that she might be ironically, given the story, that she might be too old for this part.
Oh boy.
But that's rude and not true. So
Yes. Yeah.
that's all I have to say about that.
Agreed.
Anyway, so again, intrigued to see that. And do you have any other thoughts on Sunset Boulevard before we talk about the Oscars of this year?
No, I think I'm good on that front.
Yeah. Well, just for those who haven't seen it, who need to see it again, I believe it is now available on Amazon Prime. And it's so rewatchable, I think, that I just get so much from it. And it's such a perfect representation of the anxieties of Hollywood at the time, and done in a way that is so everyone at the top of their game. Like, I Billy Wilder is one of my absolute top directors that there has ever been, just because of the level of specificity, and I don't know, he just has a certain X factor quality to his films and this is probably his best. So yeah, it's incredible, and truly Gloria Swanson delivers an all-time performance for me.
Definitely.
That went on to lose. So when we come back, we will be discussing why Sunset Boulevard lost Best Picture to another showbiz drama, All About Eve.
Yes, you'll read the big black headlines about Norma Desmond and this Hollywood scandal. But you'll never read the true story about the rest of us who were part of it. Me, for instance, Joe Gillis, a promising young writer from Dayton, Ohio. And Betty, that nice kid I met at a Hollywood party, who knew nothing about me, but knew what she wanted. Don't you love Artie?
Of course I love him. I always will. I'm just not in love with him anymore.
What happened?
You did?
Well, we should have lived happily ever after, like they do in the movies. But this was different, because this is a Hollywood story about the people who make the movies. The little ones that you never hear of, like Betty and me. The great ones, like Cecil B. DeMille. All those who knew Norma Desmond, a strange woman who left her mark on all of us who crossed her path. Has it ever occurred to you that I may have a life of my own, that there may be some girl that I'm crazy about?
Who? Some car hop or dress extra?
What I'm trying to say is that I'm all wrong for you. You want a Valentino, somebody with polo ponies, a big shot.
What you're trying to say is you don't want me to love you. Say it. Say it.
Gloria Swanson, one of the great personalities of this generation, in a role that comes to an actress once in a lifetime. Rising to the heights, William Holden creates a startling portrayal. And a new star is born in Sunset Boulevard, Miss Nancy Olson.
Joe? Where are you? What's this all about?
Why don't you come out and see for yourself? The address is 10,086 Sunset Boulevard.
Yes, come out to see for yourself the film that reaches a new milestone of dramatic daring. The film that every critic says is a giant among motion pictures.
And we're back. So now we'll be discussing why Sunset Boulevard lost Best Picture to All About Eve. Sunset Boulevard was nominated for 11 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director for Billy Wilder, Best Actor for William Holden, Best Actress for Gloria Swanson, Best Supporting Actor for Eric von Stroheim, Best Supporting Actress for Nancy Olson, Best Story and Screenplay, Best Art Direction, Best Cinematography, both for black and white, both Best Film Editing and Best Scoring of a Dramatic or Comedy Picture. And it won for Screenplay and Art Direction and Score. And before the Oscars, Sunset Boulevard won the Golden Globe for Best Picture, and the National Board of Review Best Picture, and the Writers Guild Award for Best Written Drama. And then we had All About Eve winning the BAFTA, and the DGA, and the WGA for Best Written Comedy, and the New York Film Critics. So we had a bit of a race here, I would say. So the big question here is, we have these two films that tackle show business in interesting incisive ways. And I'm curious to hear from you why you think All About Eve is the one that triumphs here.
Yeah, I don't I don't think there's a great answer for this.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, truly these films do have so many similarities. They're both addressing a lot of the same issues. They both use a similar kind of flashback voiceover narrative structure. They're both kind of cynical. They both make these references to show business. I think because Sunset Boulevard is more stylized and a more pointed critique of the film industry specifically, as opposed to theater being the show business they're talking about in All About Eve, that, like I said a little bit earlier, it could be taken by some audience members to just feel too pointed or perhaps too controversial. This is an industry that was sort of born and bred on loyalty, especially, you know, coming from the studio system. So I can see how that might turn some people off. But at the end of the day, it was winning so many other awards that it's just kind of possible that it comes down to taste. Which one did you like better? I don't know. I don't think there's a perfect answer. There's no magic bullet on this one.
Yeah, I know. This is a toughie. But we should mention that All About Eve broke a record of the most nominations ever at that time with 14 nominations, which is wild, especially with a film that isn't necessarily like this big Titanic like technical achievement.
Which Titanic was the one that matched that.
Exactly.
It took so many years.
Yeah.
40
right.
years.
Yep. But like, you know, 2 Best Actress nominations, 2 Supporting Actress nominations. I don't think that's ever been replicated from what I remember. And you know, it's just, of course, the only one that wins is The Man.
I think Thelma and Louise had 2 best actresses.
Yeah, but like
but yeah,
film.
for multiple. Got it. Yeah.
Yeah. But just I think All About Eve. I think maybe the difference is there is a little bit more of a hopefulness, perhaps, with All About Eve, especially with the character of Margot Channing and how she does go through a lot, just like Norma Desmond does, in sort of grappling with middle age and being rejected by the industry. But also she actively chooses to be like, okay, I'm stepping out of the spotlight for a little bit, you know? It's not just like she's gone into this delusional fantasy. She actively makes choices by the end that are a little more hopeful, I suppose.
Yeah, she learns.
Yeah. That's
which
probably
is
the main thing.
A really compelling character trait. I mean, that's what 99% of well-written characters do by the end of a movie. So
yeah. And with Sunset Boulevard, there's definitely a lot more of a darkness there, that it is more of a, you know, film noir sort of, not necessarily B-movie sort of thing, but just reaching some very dark depths that up to that point, you know, there were really no major Best Picture winners that did that sort of thing on that level. And then when you have All About Eve, I guess it's just more, even if it does have a lot of you know, the sarcastic sort of wittiness to it that's a little dark and innuendos, it still is more or less a straightforward showbiz comedy drama sort of thing.
Definitely.
So, hard to really say what specifically resonated with the industry at the time, but I do think that there's something there that just with All About Eve, it's a little more of a comforting experience by the end than what they give you with Sunset Boulevard, which is just, this is what you have to look forward to.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of start at the, if you think about like a graph that kind of charts your emotions of like how you're feeling. With All About Eve, it's kind of jagged. Like it takes you in so many different directions, and you change your alliances, or you know, get mad at one person and then forgive them. And with Sunset Boulevard, it's almost like it starts at the top and it just tumbles down.
Yeah.
Like everything is going bad from minute one.
Yeah.
And I think, that could be jarring if that's not your type of movie for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think on that note, and this might be just me projecting because this is kind of how I feel, which I'm sure we're going to get into that later. But just there's something really satisfying about watching an ensemble piece.
Yeah.
And Sunset Boulevard isn't that. I mean, it kind of takes place in two separate worlds that never really interact with each other. And when they do, it's very fleeting and intense.
Yeah.
And so, it's fun to like watch these different characters kind of interact and get mad at each other and figure out how to change each other's mind.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we can talk about it now, actually, it's just, I think All About Eve is completely timeless, just in its execution. It's one of the most clever screenplays ever, with so many quotable lines and just this incredible performance by Bette Davis. And the very last line she says in the film, I just love.
Oh, yeah.
Where she's at the award ceremony for Anne Baxter's character, Eve, and she just looks at her and goes, "You can put that award where your heart should be." Just walks away. What a mood. Ugh.
Yeah. For real. Yeah. I feel that. Yeah. I mean, I'll just out myself and say that All About Eve is probably my favorite movie, like if not number one, in the top three for sure.
Yeah.
So it's like hard for me to say a bad word about this movie.
Oh yeah.
Or think it doesn't deserve the world. But yeah, I mean, just every single line that Bette Davis gives in this movie is just incredible.
It's
and
just dripping.
The way that she kind of carries her body, she uses her like shoulders and her arms to kind of, tell how disappointed she is. Like when I was rewatching it, I found myself just once again blown away. Like when Thelma Ritter's character comes in and she says, "Oh, well, like he's been here for 20 minutes. And she kind of finishes her martini, hands the glass over, and then like sways her body around in a way that you just know she's about to snap. Yep. And I'm so blown away by it. I just love it so much.
Beautiful choreography all throughout. And again, it gets to the heart of the difficulties of being a woman in the entertainment industry, how actresses and singers, they just get replaced once they reach a certain age. And what do you do when that happens, basically? Like, how do you react to that? And the same thing, I guess, goes for women who are trying to break into the industry, which makes Eve's arc so fascinating. You have to be at the right place at the right time, that sort of thing. And it's really remarkable, I think, to see these studio films, telling on itself, taking its own industry to task about the double standards.
Right. But I think it's also important to acknowledge that neither of these films take the extra step to say, oh, maybe we should write more roles for older women. Like they're not advocating that at all. They're basically just saying this thing exists. This fact that you can age out is a thing, but they don't really care what happens to you after that.
Yeah. It's just like, we're pointing this out and this is just the reality of the world.
Yeah.
It's also interesting, I think, to have these older women like Margot Channing and then Norma Desmond, who are growing older, but I think emotionally they still feel so young and they sometimes act immaturely. So there's kind of an irony to that I find so fascinating. Also, Edith Head, once again,
winner,
continuing to raise the bar for us all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Legendary costume design and another very deserved Oscar for her.
Puts pockets in a dress.
I mean,
what a winner.
What an icon.
Yeah.
This is, again, going to be one of the most difficult calls to make by the end here for which film truly deserved it, because you could not go wrong either way. And it does make me wish that these two movies came out in separate years so that we could reward both of them.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, especially with some of these weaker fields from the 1950s. We could have used the Sunset Boulevard for one of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely true.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's get to a few Twitter questions, shall we?
Yeah.
Everyone had a lot to say, and we're very curious about our thoughts on both Sunset Boulevard and All About Eve specifically. So let's just run through a few of these here. Juan Carlos Oyano asked, Gloria Swanson aside, not sure if Sunset Boulevard deserved its other acting nominations. Thoughts?
Ooh. I don't see why not. I think they did.
Including Nancy Olsen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, why not? I mean, I think obviously I would have to do more research to kind of see what else was out there that year to know contextually whether it makes sense or not. But I mean, it's not like I left those movies feeling actively turned off by any performance.
Yeah.
I
would say all of the nominations are generally deserved. Maybe not as much for Nancy Olsen, but I don't really have a problem with it either. I think they all sort of did what they had to do, I guess you could say, and raised the bar. So,
yeah, why not?
But Joey Ailman said, considering Cecil B. DeMille plays himself in Sunset Boulevard, do you think it's ever going to be possible to receive an acting nomination for playing oneself?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Maybe that should have happened this year with Kevin Garnett.
Ooh, wow. I like that.
Yeah.
Also love that you brought this up in the middle of discussing Sunset Boulevard and All About Eve.
You know, I don't know. The mind wanders, I guess.
Yes, I love it.
But people, I mean, when people were kind of talking about Uncut Gems as a Oscar contender, that was something that was brought up. So I don't think it's or not within the range of possibility for sure.
Yeah. I mean, performers have gotten nominated for what were considered roles in which they were quote unquote playing themselves. So
right.
I have to imagine there could be an extension of that at one point, that if there is an actor out there that especially is exaggerated with their characterization, I suppose, and is vanity free with how they express themselves, I can imagine that happening at one point. So
yeah,
I think it's possible. Fingers crossed. This is from Fritz and the Oscars, who said, do you agree that the theory of nominees canceling each other out is BS? So this is presumably in reference to the All About Eve ladies all losing.
Yeah, I've heard this theory. I don't honestly know that much about it. But I think probably both things are true.
Yeah.
To a certain extent, it probably is a myth. But to another extent, especially in a case like this, where the studios had such a heavy hand in promoting the Oscar campaigns, Fox had a priority here, and it was Anne Baxter. So I mean, it's not that they cancel each other out. It's just that resources dictate one over the other is going to get more attention, and maybe that messes with people's priorities or influences people in a certain way that it just ultimately ends up canceling each other.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of complicated and hard to know, but
I truly think that in cases like this, it is very situational, and that you can't put a rule to it that anytime two co-stars are against each other, that they will automatically cancel each other out. Especially we've seen even in recent years, just with Melissa Leo winning over Amy Adams, for example. It happens more in the supporting categories for sure, but it's just so situational that there is almost always one person who is favored over the other. That I just don't know how much people vote in a way that's I love the favorite, but what am I going to do? Emma Stone or Rachel Weisz? What do I do? And I don't think it's really people think that way, but anyway.
Right. Yeah. I mean, people just want to vote for a person.
Yeah.
They don't think but I love this movie. How do I vote half for one and half for another?
Right. anyway, yeah, I just think it's very situational.
Yeah.
And so our friend, the Academy Queens, said, Brandon and I, this is from Joey, Brandon and I were very much against the idea that Anne Baxter was the result of a vote split. Brandon actually gave Baxter the win, and I gave it to Eleanor Parker. What do you think of our take on this Best Actress year, and do you agree with us, though, that Swanson is better than Davis? Oh, boy.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, I'll preface this by saying I don't think there's a wrong answer.
Yes.
like
truly, yeah.
Like, have your take.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Have your take and eat it too. Yeah, I mean, I personally love Betty Davis's performance so much that, like, of course, like, I'm going to say that was the best one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know.
Well, I would definitely, for me, do Gloria Swanson for a number of reasons. Just, I think I would, if I was a voter in 1950, I would probably be very caught up in this idea of her narrative, of her comeback, quite honestly, because I'm usually taken with those sorts of things anyway. But interesting for Brandon, I will say, to pick Anne Baxter over everyone, because that is definitely not the most popular take.
I would say Eleanor Parker is also not a popular take.
Yeah.
Although Caged is definitely underrated. It's a great movie.
Yeah, I have not seen it. So I would need to watch that to be totally sure on that. But I know a few people had responded to that question in particular, talking about how they also love Eleanor Parker at Caged. So it really feels like one of those races where they couldn't have gone wrong with any of the people nominated, which is beautiful and doesn't always happen.
Right, yeah. And also, I mean, Judy Holliday. We haven't really talked about her at all.
We'll talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah. So Juan Carlos Ollano said, did Anne Baxter do the right thing, or should she have gone supporting?
Oh, I feel like she should have been supporting.
You do?
Yeah.
Go on.
I think it would have been good strategy for the studio, because she would have absolutely walked away with that.
Yeah.
No question. And she does share, I think, almost as like equal or more screen time to Betty Davis. And as Beanie would say, it is the titular role.
Mm-hmm.
But I do feel like her place in the narrative and the way that her character sort of interacts with Margot's as this antagonist kind of places her in more of a traditional supporting like plot device. And so I think it would have been really smart for her to go into supporting.
Yeah, good strategy. But
yeah,
I think she's fine in lead, personally.
Mm-hmm.
It really, by the end, it's really feels much more strongly like it's Eve's story, especially when we get to the unraveling of everything with her and George Sanders. Is very much a standout scene and happens at the very end. And I don't know, it's, for me, they are clearly co-leads, personally. But I definitely understand what you're saying with just the role there. And I think that's definitely what they would do in the modern era of campaigning.
Yeah, I mean, either one of them would have been put in supporting. Yeah. Because I could also see an argument that Margot could be supporting as well.
That'd be wild. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hypotheticals.
Yeah.
Well, Ronaldo Sosa said, if Anne Baxter had been in supporting, do you think all three, Baxter, Holm, and Ritter, would have gotten in? If not, who would have missed? And would Baxter and Davis have won in that case? So lots of questions there.
Wow.
First of all,
what do you think?
I kind of do think that all three probably would have gotten in. I would say the least likely to have done it would be maybe Celeste Holm. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I mean, she kind of has the Nancy Olsen role a little bit.
Yes.
Which is
the normal person.
Yeah.
Quote unquote.
Who else? It was Josephine Hull.
Yes, who was our winner. Yeah.
And who else was in it besides Celeste Holm and Thelma Ritter?
It's Hope Emerson. There it is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, from Caged.
Interesting. I haven't seen Harvey in so long.
Yeah. Well, that's a very loud, outstanding sort of role.
Hmm.
But I don't know. Do you think all three would have gotten in?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say having not seen Harvey or Caged for a really long time,
Yeah.
but it kind of seems like it.
Yeah. I mean, it had so much support overall that
Right.
I feel like,
I mean, it's very hypothetical, but it could happen.
yeah. Yeah. And do we think Baxter and Davis would have won in that case? I think Baxter definitely.
Oh
But
yeah, for
Davis,
sure.
I'm still not totally convinced would have won.
It definitely alters the formula a little bit,
Yeah.
but I don't think it guarantees anything.
Yeah. I sort of think Judy Holliday still wins that, but
Hmm.
we'll get to that. Well, Baby Clyde's Oscars says it always irritates me when people suggest Baxter should have gone supporting.
There you go.
How on earth is her character anything but lead? The film is literally all about Eve. Thankfully, movie stars weren't such embarrassingly desperate hoes about getting awards back in the 50s. I don't know if
That's
that's a
funny.
question, but
I also don't know if that's true.
yeah, well, I understand the sentiment because
Yeah.
it's certainly clear that a lot of stars, quote unquote, really just never wanted to be in supporting, and there was a bit of a shame associated with that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, for Anne Baxter, she already had a Best Supporting Actress Oscar.
yeah,
And so for her, it would have been more of an ego question
yeah,
than anything else. I think now people are just like, oh, you have one. That's all you need.
yeah,
But I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like what I was saying before. I think she sort of operates as this um, narrative villain.
mm-hmm.
And it's not often that the villain is the lead character that you're sort of following around and rooting for. And so I
Yeah,
think
that's true. Yeah,
sort of like the traditional place role that she's playing within the story is just sort of usually seen as supporting. So I could see how you could sell it that way,
yeah,
just because it sort of subverts the normal like protagonist hero kind of idea.
you make a good case. Yeah. Just one more from Catherine Short. This is a fun one. If a remake of All About Eve were to be made, who would you want to write, direct, and star in the film?
Wow.
Do you have your fantasies about All About Eve remakes?
Well, I've never thought about it because I just love that one so much and it
Mm,
seems so perfect to me that
yeah.
like I would never greenlight it, but
No, I know. Yeah.
I don't know. Have you thought about it?
I very briefly thought about it last night when I got this question, and even though I hate to say it again, but even though Glenn Close might be a little too old for the role,
Mm.
Glenn Close and Lady Gaga, let's go.
Oh, wow. That would be so funny.
Yeah.
There are 100 people in a theater.
I just think they would work so well together, and they have such a cute little chemistry. Whatever they were with each other on in the award season last year, I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think The Favorite is almost
Yeah,
exactly all about Eve,
that is
like
true.
in a different context. I mean,
Yes.
with some other themes thrown in there for sure, but
Mhm.
like, um, yeah, hmm.
Yeah.
I let because they also have to be close enough in age
That's the thing. Yeah.
that it's feasible that they could have the same role,
Hmm.
which today is a lot harder to do because I feel like we're much more liberal about how we treat age now.
Right.
So I don't know.
One thing I thought about literally just by looking at pictures of Anne Baxter, which sounds creepy, but just bear with me, is just she struck me a lot as like a Florence Pugh type. I don't
Oh
know.
wow, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah, I don't know. So
She would
possibly,
be amazing at that role.
yeah, I think she could pull that off.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I would love to see that actually.
I was also just, this is just, whatever. I was just literally Googling actresses in their 50s just to get a good sense of like the types of actors out there who could do this. I stumbled upon one that I'm like, this could be an interesting sort of comeback in a way, but Catherine Zeta-Jones?
Oh,
Question mark
interesting.
for Margot Channing? I don't know.
Yeah. That'd be, I mean, again, it's also like that's
She has
literally
that
kind of
air
what,
about her.
well, that's kind of what Velma Kelly and Roxy Hart's
That's what I mean.
confrontation is.
Yeah.
Like she's just taking her spot.
Yeah, so these are all fun.
Wow, it's almost like this is a theme we see with women.
Yes. And the stories that resonate with Oscars. Interesting. But let's move on to just a few other the Best Picture nominees that came out this year. Let's talk about Born Yesterday. So, yeah, here we have the woman that beat Gloria Swanson and Bette Davis and Anne Baxter, one of the most notorious Oscar races in history, where Judy Holliday wins for Born Yesterday. So this is sort of like a Pygmalion type of story where Judy Holliday is the girlfriend of this horrible businessman who's trying to basically buy congressmen, and a lot of it is just about her being very unsophisticated. And then this journalist, played by William Holden, is hired to just educate her, and of course they end up falling in love. Mostly a broad comedy, and I think it's very charming for what it is. And I don't know about you, but I think Judy is honestly pretty great in this film.
Oh yeah, she's wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, I think she has this remarkable ability to play dumb in a way that you know that she must be the smartest person in the room. Because I think it's really easy to play dumb poorly. And plenty of actors have done that.
Yeah.
And she just does it in a way that just feels so fresh and fun. And I absolutely love her performance in that movie.
Yeah. And she's so brash and loud, and I feel like she just has such a knack for comedic timing. And
absolutely.
Watching it this past week, I was really reminded quite a lot of like what Madeline Kahn would do over the next few decades. Just very much vanity free, just like go for the biggest laugh and, you know, be as annoying as you can be and just go for it all the way. That's what she really does in this film. And it's such a fascinating contrast to most of the other actresses in that category and what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to put myself in the mindset of people who voted for her specifically, of like what they were seeing and what they really enjoyed. And I think it is a nice contrast, especially because Caged is also a pretty dark movie. It feels like a relief almost to kind of get to Born Yesterday and finally feel like, oh, there's this woman who just is able to like poke fun at herself and have a good time and do some things that are good for her.
Yeah. This is
I don't know.
The Star is Born type of performance and arrival for Judy Holliday. Yeah. Well, we got a question from Ronaldo Sosa, who said, is Judy Holliday's Vice Versa the most iconic line reading of all time?
Well, she's up against the Cecil DeMille line and also Fasten Your Seatbelts.
Tough, yeah.
So, tough to say.
Perhaps not the most iconic, but should be remembered more. I'll say that.
Yeah.
Well, Jeffrey Kerr asked us, since Anne Baxter and Bette Davis apparently canceled each other out in Best Actress for All About Eve, why wasn't Gloria Swanson able to benefit from that for Sunset Boulevard instead of Judy Holliday? So just going back to that, I just think it stood out so much what Judy Holliday was doing compared to the others, and also was a more positive experience overall watching her in that role, that I think that's the reason why the alternative wasn't Gloria Swanson, but that it was Judy Holliday. Yeah.
And I also haven't watched Born Yesterday in a while, but from what I remember, I don't think it's asking you to confront any preconceived notions that you have about like women's and aging.
Yeah, not as much. Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of like, part of the plot is literally a message of conformity and like becoming this better, like more acceptable type of woman.
Yeah, for society. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think as you're entering a decade that is like notorious for conformity and feeling like you fit in, perhaps it resonated more closely.
Yeah, good point.
For people who just were not in the mood to like sit back and question, like, why are these women breaking down? What are we doing to cause this?
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
Very good point. Yeah. And we got this other question from Fritz in the Oscars that says, do you think Judy's win was really a surprise, or is this rewriting history because her competitors are more well known today? More so rewriting history, I would say, just because of how iconic those other roles are, but I don't know if it was truly a surprise in the end. She had a big campaign behind her. And, yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's hard to say. That's a really good question. I mean, I think at the time, Gloria Swanson believed that she was going to win.
Yeah. She had won a Golden Globe for it.
Yeah.
Previously.
So I think there were certain parties that were definitely convinced of what was going to happen. And the fact Bette Davis, I think, could also believe that. She'd won a lot of like critics awards, I believe.
Yeah.
So I'm not necessarily sure, but something to think about for sure.
Yeah. And then Mr. Mistopheles said, do you think William Holden should have been a double nominee for Sunset Boulevard and Born Yesterday? I would say he's fine with the Sunset Boulevard nomination.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. I think he's handsome and cute and charming in Born Yesterday, but not really a Oscar-worthy nomination. So,
right. And I mean, if we're talking about canceling someone out, whether that's true or not, it doesn't seem to have ever really worked in anyone's favor to be nominated against themselves.
Yeah. Well, it's literally impossible because of the Academy ruling. But yeah. So that's about all I got on that. Let's talk about Father of the Bride and King Solomon's Mines. So these two might not be as well regarded as others, but Father of the Bride is another comedy in the lineup. Pretty straight down the middle. You know, if you've seen the remake with Steve Martin from the 90s, it's about this father played by Spencer Tracy who is just dealing with all the little details and expenses that are involved with his daughter's wedding, played by Elizabeth Taylor. And kind of just about him trying to accept the fact that his daughter has to be free. I think it's cute. I think it's charming. I don't really know if it's Best Picture worthy, but...
certainly not this year.
Yeah. Doesn't really hold a candle to others in this lineup. But... solid Spencer Tracy performance, pretty complex for him, very conflicted father sort of thing. But another thing that's outside of National Velvet, I guess, in the 40s, this might be the last time I'm talking about Elizabeth Taylor outside of maybe some bonus episodes that I get to, which is sad.
Oh.
You know, I've had fun talking about this peak in her career in the 50s as I go backwards, and the 60s, of course, but but anyway, there's some solid comedy here that is interesting to watch. Not all of it holds up, but...
and I think it goes to kind of emphasize the problems that women have with aging are shown like on the other extreme by Elizabeth Taylor in this movie, where she's 18 years old playing a woman who's about to get married and is like, you know, getting her life sentence, basically.
Pretty much.
So it's kind of, it just, I think, is a nice example on the other end of things to sort of show the sliding age scale for what women were expected to be doing at certain times in their lives.
Yeah, that's very true. I hadn't really thought about it in that context, but I think it's a somewhat of a disposable film overall. But I don't know. It's fine. It's hard to really work up a big argument about it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just, I think it was a big hit, I believe, and charming enough.
It's a novel, I believe, beforehand.
Yes.
I think it's only a little egregious in terms of what wasn't nominated, which I think we'll get to in a minute. But yeah, I could think of some things that I would perhaps have chosen instead.
I mean, it really feels like one of those films that people get caught up in the moment, and they're just like, oh, that was a really nice experience. Let's nominate it for Best Picture. But then, like, they're ignoring these deeper, thoughtful films in the process that, I mean, this still happens in the 2010s. And so, I don't know.
Definitely.
The other one here that is quite different from the rest is King Solomon's Mines. So
I've never seen this movie, but I did watch the trailer this morning, and I was like, oh no.
Yes. That's how I felt watching it for the first time this week. It's we're talking about another travelogue film in Best Picture that the Academy was fond of at that time. This time we're in Africa. So what could possibly go wrong about white people walking around Africa in the 1950s?
Oh God. I mean, it truly not a fun trailer to watch.
No.
It's, as we like to say now, a little problematic. So
yes,
I can only imagine what that film is actually like.
Yes. So yeah, it takes place in Africa, mostly about white people. So this is the Oscars we're talking about. So of course they paid attention to that.
This is before Magumbo?
Yes.
Right?
Yes,
okay.
That was 53, I believe.
Okay.
It's about this woman played by Deborah Carr who has a husband that goes missing in the titular mines. And she like pairs up with this hunter guy, and he's killing a bunch of wild animals, which we get to see in lovely detail. And she's just like screaming all the time because Africa is so scary. Easily the most dated film here.
Right.
Hard to argue with that. But even beyond the dated elements, as far as like the racial politics and the colonialism stuff, there's a lot of misogyny going on here in relation to the Deborah Carr character. It's pretty brutal to watch overall, I would say. And even like, this is advertised as a big sweeping adventure film, but even on that level, I don't even think it's that engaging. It really peters out in the end too. So
it really feels like the only good that might have come from this movie is just getting Deborah Carr's name on the map a little bit.
Yep, exactly. And she would have a flourishing career in the 50s after this. And so anyway, oddly enough, it's nominated for 3 Oscars and wins 2 of them. So the only one it didn't win was Best Picture. It won for cinematography and film editing, which is a choice.
Do they actually, is it real footage of them killing animals?
Yeah.
Oh,
for
God.
the most part. I mean, it starts literally with an elephant being shot. So.
Oh, God.
And
in the trailer, they have like they're walking in the swamp or something, and they just like shoot an alligator in the head.
Yeah.
I was like, what is this? It's crazy.
Anyway, I was looking at reviews of the time just to see what was the appeal, And Variety said, I wrote this down, they said, high excitement in meetings with wild savages and beasts, and a number of excellently staged fights to the death. Sure.
Sure, yeah.
I really got nothing from this. I think it's one of the worst Best Picture nominees of the 50s.
It's just like very early spectacle.
Yeah.
Like falling into that trap, I think.
Truly get nothing from it. There's no message. Sorry to be one of those message film people. But
wow, Nancy.
But there's just, you get nothing from it other than seeing footage of Africa At least it's not on a soundstage. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. I don't need to watch that movie.
Yeah, you don't. You really, really don't, unless you are a completist, which some of us are afflicted with, sadly. Well, this was from Jackson DeStefano, who said, I imagine there'll be enough talk about All About Eve and Sunset Boulevard, so I want to ask about King Solomon's Mines. Why? Why does this movie exist? Why is it so bad? Great question. I don't know the answer. I really don't know why it even needs to exist. Other than just giving white people the thrills of what they might experience in Africa, which obviously for the most part is largely negative, and
right.
in that process is incredibly racist in what they depict. So
yeah, like I guess I would contextualize it in like sort of what we were talking about earlier, and the idea that TV is a threat now, and you're not going to see anything like this on TV.
Yeah.
And also just the idea that more films are shot on location starting around now, around this point.
Yeah.
So it's probably just this that selling point of being like, oh, well, we were actually in Africa, because it says that a lot in the trailer. It says actually in Africa.
Oh, yes.
Like it says actually so many times that you're like,
for real though, we're there.
You were in Africa.
Yes.
And so there must be some element of that's like really appealing, kind of like a pre Nat Geo world.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I don't know when Nat Geo started, but where you just can sort of be a voyeur.
Yeah, pretty much. So, and also we should just mention that it was the #1 box office hit of the year. Which is
over Samson and Delilah?
Yeah. Wow. #1, which is probably another reason it was nominated for Best Picture, and so that was definitely big in the 50s, was this idea of no matter how dumb and problematic the script may be, it's just a big spectacle and it made a lot of money. So Best Picture.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Ronaldo Sosa said, how many layers of tan did Stuart Granger have to get to look like that?
Exactly 1 can of paint.
Yes, I think it's a lot of makeup.
Yeah.
It's that's a whole other can of worms there. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know if you are that knowledgeable with Deborah Kerr's career overall, but we got a question about her that is from Catherine Short that's just said, could you discuss Deborah Kerr's evolution as an actress between her Powell and Pressburger phase in the 1940s to her sexy leading lady run in the 1950s to her more homely roles in the 1960s?
Oh, yeah. So I'm not sure on the specifics of her like conversion from British movies to American movies. But I think she starred in a movie with Spencer Tracy, and that must have drawn the attention, or at least that must have been at her first interaction with MGM, which is I think where she was ultimately signed. Powell and Pressburger was like late 40s, so then that must have been like leading up to King Solomon.
Yep.
Right? And then from there, she kind of like, I love Deborah Kerr's career because her roles are so fascinating. Like on the one hand, I think of her as this very like maternal figure, but at the same time, she has like some of these really, really like kind of sexy roles, like in From Here to Eternity, which is kind of like this emblematic of like movie magic and like how it relates to that kind of thing. But I don't know. Yeah. She quit acting very early because I think like Margot and Norma, she kind of read the writing on the wall, which is that she wasn't going to be getting very many compelling roles after a certain age. And I think it's kind of premature. It really sucks. I wish she had had more time to explore her talent as like an older woman.
Yeah. But she has a really compelling presence to her, I think, and she definitely doesn't get enough credit, and she didn't get enough credit, notoriously one of the most nominated actors to never win. But yeah, I was just doing a little more digging into the later stages of her career, and she had a lot of interesting friction when it came to actors' nudity, like that whole wave in the later 60s that she felt sort of pressured to do that in a film, and also just the parts that were just not there for her anymore, even though she was in her late 40s or so. They just really just dried up and found more work on television, as we actually see these days.
Yeah,
A lot.
that's funny. That's an interesting parallel.
Yeah.
Because I think, I mean, so many actresses, I think maybe from before her generation, though, like more of Betty Davis's generation, obviously, did a lot of that kind of like shock horror
Yeah.
stuff just to stay relevant, like Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte and Baby Jane, and like Joan Fontaine did one that was horrible about like Satanists. And I just don't think Deborah Carr was down to do that.
Yeah.
She was not gonna put herself in that kind of situation just to keep working.
Yeah. Which is her prerogative. Yeah. But overall, this Best Picture lineup is very top heavy, I will say, with a lot of heavy hitters, and a few that are, again, more or less forgotten, and one that should be forgotten. And so it's really, I feel like I keep running into this exact same scenario in all of these Best Picture lineups in the 50s, where there's always at least one that's very dated. There's always one that was a hit at the time and is charming, but isn't really that much standing out anymore. And then there's always the big dogs at the top, you know?
Yeah.
So another interesting one that is very emblematic of the 50s. Okay, so let's get into our Should Have Been a Contender segment. So this is other films that were not nominated for Best Picture that we think maybe should have had more of a presence. So did you have any in mind here?
The Third Man is a big one for me that that blows my mind. That's such a wonderful film. And I think, plays at a very similar level to All About Eve and Sunset Boulevard for me.
Yeah.
So that's kind of surprising, to say the least.
We got many questions about The Third Man, actually.
Yeah. And also In a Lonely Place.
Yep, that one too.
Bogart movies. Another one, I think, probably victim to this sort of anti-noir sentiments the Academy seemed to have at the time. How about you?
Yeah, well, definitely two at the top for me. So we're very simpatico there. With The Third Man, I love just everything that Orson Welles is doing in that film. It's so chilling. His character and his master plan behind it all is very dark. And so I love that. The last third of the film, I think, is really breathtaking, not only on a story level, but just on a cinematography level. It's gorgeous.
Yeah. And I think it won cinematography, right?
It did indeed.
Okay.
Yeah. We got a question about it.
At least there's that.
Yeah, we got this question from Andrew Carden, who did say, did The Third Man deserve its cinematography win over All About Eve and Sunset Boulevard?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't like saying like deserved. Like I think some of the vocabulary used around like awards and stuff, I want to find a way to kind of rephrase things because well, I don't know. I haven't come up with like the solution to that, but it's something I'm very wary of because it's also subjective. It's like, does it deserve it? It's like, I don't know. What do you think?
Who am I to say?
Yeah. I would have voted for The Third Man is how I would say it.
Perhaps that's the better question there. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I love it's sort of like German expressionism, how like sharp the contrasts are and how they use the shadows and profile images, or not profile. What is it called when you're like an eclipse, like your shadow
like
is
a
used.
Silhouette.
That's the word.
Okay.
Silhouetted images. The way, the cat revealing Orson Welles there is just so breathtaking.
Yeah.
So and then the trees at the end, I just think it's so beautiful. So
yeah, I will say it's a very worthy winner. I think Sunset Boulevard might come close for me if I were to be voting, but I think from top to bottom, the third man is just so gorgeously photographed that I can't deny it. Also, I wanted to just highlight the soundtrack there, which is highly unusual.
Right,
And
but I mean, it's so memorable.
yeah,
You
it's
like,
like plucky and fun.
yeah, I mean, what a choice.
Yeah.
I am obsessed with that.
Yeah, a brave choice, and it really worked out very well.
Mhm.
Kevin Clowder said concerning the Academy liked The Third Man enough to nominate it for Best Director. What do you think kept it from being nominated for Best Score, Best Supporting Actor, or Best Picture? Do we think it is the film noir aspect of things?
And also, I think that it's British, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I think there's probably just some like institutional
Mm-hmm.
bias there. Maybe like an effort on behalf of the studio might have not. I don't know anything about it, but I think that's like, it'd be fair to explore that as a reason.
Yeah, and that was especially true in those days, that sort of tension there.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you had columnists like Hedda Hopper stoking the fire there when it came to that. So Joey Ailman said, did Orson Welles deserve a nomination for Best Supporting Actor? Or was the Academy still bitter about Hearst Gate? In reference to, of course, William Randolph Hearst. I think I would have nominated him. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a brief role, but incredibly memorable. And who knows if he would have had feelings about being nominated and supporting. I don't know. But,
yeah. And again, like another endlessly quotable script. And I think so much of that has to do with his delivery.
yeah. Oh, and I guess this other question from Brandon Stanwyck is similar enough, which is he just said, would you have nominated any of the actors from The Third Man? Definitely Orson Welles. And
oh, maybe that's a good supporting actress option that we talked about earlier, if all three of them, because I feel like she could have been nominated.
I would be fine with that.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. And that's Valley.
I always forget her name. Yeah,
Alida Valley.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah. All right. So let's see. Well, in a Lonely Place, just to touch on that really quick, I know that was also a big influence on Curtis Hanson when he was making L.A. Confidential.
Mm-hmm.
I think I read about how he had basically like assigned this movie for Russell Crowe and the whole cast to watch to just get a mood for the era and see where the influence came from. But definitely a fantastic Humphrey Bogart performance. Just incredible work from him, and incredibly dark. It's about this man who's a screenwriter who has a very violent temper and is suspected of murder, and he goes to some really dark depths there, and one of his better performances. So
yeah, it's definitely interesting that he's a screenwriter and like Joe.
Yes, indeed.
Because I'm not sure, in the book A Lonely Place, is he also a screenwriter, or did they add that? Because I know they changed it somewhat significantly.
Yeah,
but I'm not sure. Anyway,
another one I just wanted to talk about is The Asphalt Jungle, which is another film noir that gets nominated for director for John Huston, and also screenplay, supporting actor, cinematography. So I feel like it's probably the closest that could have gotten into Best Picture.
Yeah, definitely.
Would have been a more worthy nominee for sure over King Solomon's Mines or even Father of the Bride. But heist movie, Double Crossings, very fun. Also an appearance by Gene Hagen, who is incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good movie. I haven't watched that in a long time.
Yeah. And Sam Jaffe is justifiably nominated for supporting actor, I would say, as the mastermind behind it all. But I also want to give kudos to Lewis Calhern as the lawyer who gets involved in the proceedings and acts out pretty selfishly, but really fun performance there. Also, just to talk about Harvey, we mentioned that earlier. It's the film where Jimmy Stewart plays a man whose best friend is an invisible rabbit named Harvey. Everyone around him trying to understand him, and also his sister, played by Josephine Hull, She admits at one point to seeing Harvey sometimes, so that's a really fascinating character. And Josephine Hall wins Best Supporting Actress. She has all these great wordy monologues and the quirky sort of character work there, and she has a lot of the comedy in the film, so a cute movie. I watched it all the way back in my film studies class back in high school, and I don't know, it feels like the kind of movie that would win Best Original Screenplay or something if it came out in the 21st century, like that kind of quirky sort of thing that plays with certain elements. I don't know.
Right, yeah. I think they performed it at my high school, like we did the play or something.
Okay, work. Nice.
But one other movie that I'd love to add in is Adam's Rib.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I love that screenplay. And I think just that it goes in tandem with Born Yesterday, just because I think you can kind of think about Judy Holliday like pairing those roles in a way, like they kind of, I'm sure that people were thinking about them as like together at the time.
I forgot this was also written by Ruth Gordon.
Yeah,
that's fun.
I love her.
Yeah, good call.
Yeah.
And let me see if I have any others. Oh, well, just to touch on the Best Actor winner, we have Jose Ferrer as Cyrano de Bergerac. Classic story.
Yep.
And he becomes the first Latino actor to win, and is certainly the kind of larger-than-life performance that is just pure bait for the Academy that loves this kind of performance. And he also does have some of the tenderness to him. I think that's required for the role. Mm-hmm. The film is fine. It really just begins and ends with Jose Ferrer and his performance. But an interesting story behind this that I also saw you tweeting about the other day.
Yeah.
Which is that he was involved in the HUAC McCarthyism of the time. And that was interesting to have concurrently happening with the Oscar race.
Right. And it wouldn't be long before Judy Holliday got in trouble with that as well.
Yeah.
So that was kind of fortunate for her that she kind of got the delayed issue there.
Mm-hmm. But I think Jose Ferrer is a fantastic actor, and I love that he made history here. And it's a worthy performance. I can't really deny that. It's fully available. Like, it's in the something like the public domain. Like, I don't know, the studio's lost the rights to it, so it's on like all these different kinds of streaming services if you ever want to see it.
I think it's interesting that Judy Holliday, Jose Ferrer, and Gloria Swanson were all watching together in New York.
Yes.
Because they were all, and Celeste Holm, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They were all on stage at the time.
Yeah. I was reading all about that in Inside Oscar. There's a lot of fun stories behind the scenes there. And I know at one point, Gloria Swanson in her autobiography was talking about how the photographers and reporters wanted to stage these photos as if there was like this head-to-head like beat down between her and Judy Holliday,
right?
And she was just like, this is no.
Yeah, she seemed, I mean, from everything I've read, it seemed like she was a good sport in the room, at least. Yeah. Even if like there was some bitterness later, you know.
Yeah.
Seemed to be like a team player a little bit.
Yeah. Not as much of the diva sort of thing that people might have wanted from her, especially with the performance that she gives. Obviously, you know, it's people want to assign like as if to say this is Gloria Swanson, but you know.
Yeah, and I think that also discredits her silent career as well.
Yeah,
which is much more varied, and she does so many wonderful comedies and. She is not just Norma.
Right. Yeah, she has the range.
She has the range.
One other one I just wanted to mention, since I've been talking about them in the 50s enough, is the Disney release this year is Cinderella. This is the beginning of a strong run of animated films in this golden age of the Disney canon. we have another delicious villain in Lady Tremaine.
Yep.
Who was honestly kind of terrifying to me as a child because she was so realistic compared to other villains. Like, I feel like I would have interacted with someone like her in real life, so it was kind of chilling. And speaking of someone with very expressive eyes and facial gestures, very similar to a Norma Desmond almost.
Definitely.
So anyway, just a special shout out also to Eleanor Audley, who not only voices Lady Tremaine, but also Maleficent. And what an incredible voice.
An incredible voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, truly getting at the heart of all of my fears, which is being forced to clean.
Oh, my goodness.
My apartment.
An existential fear, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, but it's Cinderella, very beautiful score, very nice soundtrack. It's nominated for 3 Oscars for score and song and sound, and it lost all of them. But I guess it's sort of maxed out with the amount of nominations that a movie like this could have realistically achieved. But,
at the time, yeah.
Yeah, but another film centering women from this year. That's
I know
one of the better Disney
the
films.
highlight
I guess,
of 50s feminism.
Truly.
Cinderella.
Well, anyway, just to wrap up this section, I don't know if you had other films here, but we got just a few questions, just generally speaking about the 50s, now that this is the last year that I'm doing for the 50s that I wanted to get into. Well, we got this question from Juan Carlos Ollano, who said, best and weakest Best Picture lineups, ? So this is just anything from the 50s. And
Ooh, can I Google this really quick?
Yes, go for it. I wrote down my answer already, so I can talk while you do your Googling. The best for me, I don't know if I have one that's just pound for pound, like all of these films are fantastic, but I guess the closest I would come to is 1959, which has Ben-Hur and Anatomy of a Murder and The Diary of Anne Frank and The Nun's Story and Room at the Top. I generally like all those movies.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm looking now.
Okay.
Ooh, this is hard.
I also like 1957.
Yeah, I think I was going to say 1957 because Bridge on the River Kwai, 12 Angry Men, Peyton Place. We can skip Sayonara.
We talked about it on the show. Yeah. Yeah.
Witness for the Prosecution is great.
Yeah, that's a really good lineup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also like 53, From Here to Eternity,
yes.
Julius Caesar, The Robe.
But Roman Holiday.
Yeah, Roman Holiday and Shane.
Yeah. That's a pretty good one too.
Yeah.
Worst for me is probably 1955, which is the Marty year. I like Marty, but I'm not super crazy about the other 4, which is Love is a Many Splendored Thing, Mr. Roberts, Picnic, and The Rose Tattoo. I don't know if I totally love any of those as much, but that's just me. Yeah.
I haven't seen many of the films in 1952.
Okay.
Greatest Show on Earth, High Noon, Ivanhoe, Moulin Rouge, and The Quiet Man. Yeah. So I can't really say how I feel about that. So I'm just going to say that year.
Right.
Like, I just have no idea.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, having watched all of those, there's like 1 or 2 that are good. Yeah. Yeah. The others are. That's kind of what I suspected. Some of the worst of the decade. Yeah. He also asked just about our best actress lineups of the 50s, and I kind of want to say it's this one. Well, I think it for sure is this one. So I feel like we should pick a different. Right. Like, just eliminate that as a possibility. I'm gonna take a look. It seems kind of unfair. Yeah. But that's the best, I would say, without question. Yeah. I mean, it's probably one of the best of all time, so it's kind of like Well, I love the 1954 lineup with Grace Kelly and Dorothy Dandridge, Judy Garland, Audrey Hepburn, and Jane Wyman. I really love all those movies, and I love all those actresses. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think 1959 is really great.
Ooh, yes, that's a fun year.
Yeah, Room at the Top, Simone Signoret is amazing.
Yes,
I love that movie. Pillow Talk.
I'm glad
Kind
Doris
of random,
Day got a
but
nomination.
yeah,
just
like
in
I'm
general
glad she got
for her
in
career.
there.
Yeah.
Audrey Hepburn in The Nun Story is fabulous. And Katharine Hepburn and Elizabeth Taylor in Suddenly Last Summer.
Delicious.
Yes.
Yeah. That's probably it for me too.
Yeah. Edward, My Son. That's what I was thinking of, because Deborah Kerr was nominated in 1949.
Right.
There we go. And that's what it was, because it was the British American collaboration with MGM. Right. Okay, so I wasn't totally wrong.
Yeah. Nice. Well, the other question was, what are the most egregious Best Picture snubs of the 50s based on contemporary reception and how well it did in other categories? Okay, so I wrote down a bunch of them because I didn't want to dilly-dally too much here. But
yeah,
I'm just going to throw out some titles here. You'll probably agree with some of these. Singing in the Rain, number 1. I mean, one of the most notorious snubs of all time.
Like any of the Hitchcock movies?
Yep. North by Northwest, Rear Window, and Some Like It Hot, certainly.
Was Rebel Without a Cause or East of Eden?
Neither were nominated, so those are good choices too. Sweet Smell of Success wasn't nominated for anything, so.
Any foreign film.
Any foreign film ever. Rashomon.
Yeah.
The Night of the Hunter also. And I would argue A Star is Born, just because I like that version.
Yeah, I do too. But also, again, one of my huge biases, so I can't.
Right.
I don't know if I should speak on that.
Well, speak freely. But
The Seventh Seal was also in the 50s. Yeah, so I guess, again, any foreign film.
Yep. And The Bad and the Beautiful, just on nomination and win levels, it won 5 Oscars, and it wasn't even nominated for Best Picture. So.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. Ace in the Hole.
That's kind of like Cabaret, like how Cabaret won everything except for Best Picture.
Yeah. Wild. Yeah, and The Third Man, I guess you could say too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there's quite a few, unfortunately, that have definitely stood the test of time more than King Solomon's Mines, for sure. So,
but I think it's just a good example of, like, I think some of the questions people are asking now about whether the Academy is actually in touch with what's happening and what people are loving and what's making people excited about movies. And I think it's like pretty fair to look back on history and know that that's how it's kind of been. It's a constant challenge to iterate and keep the Academy up to date.
Yeah. And we're making these incremental steps in a positive direction. But we're not even really there yet. And it's been 92 years.
Yep.
So.
Fun.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, with this year, there's a lot of interesting modern parallels that I find, especially when it came to roles for women and how the stories we tell about women 70 years later. So. All right, so when we come back, we will be delivering our verdict as to whether we think All About Eve deserved Best Picture or if Sunset Boulevard perhaps should have taken it.
Nominations for the best film of 1950 are the following: All About Eve, 20th Century Fox; Born Yesterday, Columbia; Father of the Bride, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer; King Solomon's Mines, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer; and Sunset Boulevard, Paramount. May I have the envelope, please? I am happy to announce that the winner is All About Eve.
Mr. Darrell F. Zanuck, of course, come to the stage to accept awards for the Best Motion Picture of 1950, All About Eve. This picture received 14 nominations for Academy Awards this year, setting a new record.
And we're back. So now we'll be delivering our verdict as to whether we think All About Eve deserved Best Picture or if Sunset Boulevard really deserved it. So, Izzy, what do you think? What's your pick?
Well,
Who do you vote for?
If I haven't made it abundantly clear by now, I love All About Eve. I would have voted for All About Eve. So can't say I'm disappointed with how things turned out, but I also totally understand the other opinion. I think it's totally valid.
Yeah. Well, I will be the other opinion here, actually, because I would have voted for Sunset Boulevard. I think it gets deeper under my skin, really, with its approach. And I just tend to gravitate a lot more towards a lot darker films like that take more of a risk, even though, I mean, honestly, both of these films are like 5-star films, and they wouldn't have been wrong either way. And All About Eve is one of the top 5 Best Picture winners of all time. So I can't even say that, like, oh, how dare All About Eve beating Sunset Boulevard. They're both fantastic, but for my own personal taste, I just gravitate more towards Sunset Boulevard. So there you have it.
And we just canceled each other out. Or no, we didn't.
Yeah, I don't know. But thank you once again, Izzy, for doing this. This was a fabulous conclusion to the 50s / start to the 50s.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I had a really good time chatting with you.
I really appreciate it. So tell the fine folks where they could find more from you on the internet, and if you want to talk more about your channel, feel free.
Yeah, so if you're interested in learning the history and context of different Best Actress races and about different women in film topics, then you can check me out on YouTube. My channel is called Be Kind Rewind, and on Twitter, I think I'm BK Rewind. And then on Instagram, I think, I don't even remember. I think I'm BK_rewind. I'm so good at selling myself. So, yeah, check me out if you want to find me.
Yeah. I mean, truly one of the best voices out there talking about the Oscars. So,
oh, thank you.
Yes. So you can find more from me at Kevin_Jacobson on Twitter and on Instagram for that matter, even though I never really plug that. And you can find the show at Oscar Runner Up on Twitter, and you can find it wherever podcasts can be found, your favorite podcast app of choice. And if you want to hear more from us, go over to patreon.com/andtherunnerup to hear even more Oscar nonsense. So that's it for the 50s. So thank you so much, Izzy, for sort of welcoming me into the 50s and also exiting me into to the 40s. So once again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I will bid you all adieu.